Let's talk about blending modes in Photoshop. They're a really beneficial thing that you can do with colors and even photos and different kinds of layers. And they are things that you apply to layers to get them to overlay on top of one another in interesting ways. We've touched briefly on these, but I would like to definitely dive in much deeper and see what kind of cool things we can do together. Okay, so let's start off with some simple shapes, like some rectangles first of all. I'll make a rectangle here. Let's just keep that as purple, that's fine. Let's make another rectangle. Let's call this layer first purple rectangle. Okay, so let's make another layer, another rectangle. Let's call this one, let's pick our color first. Don't jump ahead of ourselves. Let's pick this nice pinkish reddish color. Okay, so let's call this pink rectangle. Okay, so let's start adding some blending modes. Now, the thing to know is that these are your blending modes right here, this little drop-down menu. And when you click it, you can see all of the different kinds of blending modes that we have. And there are so many, and they all do so many spectacular things. Now, it's hard to say what each one does. I would highly recommend that you just play around with them to see visually what they do. Darken obviously just darkens the one on top, and you can see that whenever you rearrange them, sometimes they'll have different effects on the other one. Okay, so darken, we have multiply, which is my personal favorite. And look at that, it just multiplied the color pink right on top of purple. So you get this color that's right in between pink and purple, and I think it looks quite nice. But as you go down, you can kind of see the different effects that these have on the shape. Some of them don't do anything, some of them do really interesting things. And then whenever you move into photography, you'll notice that there are other effects that happen as well. This is kind of interesting here. Hard light is our blending mode here. Linear light. This is just one of the most important things about Photoshop, and why Photoshop is so much better than most applications is that there are just so many amazing things that you can do like this constantly. Saturation is nice. Color is always nice. And lumosity is nice. It adds a color effect to the area of pink that is on top of the purple, but then the rest of the pink layer is turned to gray. Okay, so let's put this back on multiply because we'll be using a lot of multiply blending modes in our final project, and also darken if you're interested, but I'm going to keep it at multiply for now. Let's now talk about the difference between these two settings over here, opacity and fill. Now, we touched briefly on this before whenever we were doing a stroke around our letters during our greeting card lesson in the last class, but I just kind of want to go over it again in more detail. So, at first glance, bumping opacity down just turns down the transparency, and that seems pretty self-explanatory. But fill, on the other hand, seems to be doing the exact same thing. Now, if we added a stroke onto the outside of the shape, we would have the fill as being the pink part inside of the shape, and the stroke is simply just something outside of the fill. All right? And the fill would just bump down the shape color and not the stroke. So let's add a stroke and see that in application. I'll double click on pink rectangle to bring up our layer styles and go to stroke. And as you can see, a stroke has been added. Let's make it a little larger, 10 pixels, and let's set it on the inside because I don't like that round edge it was getting. And as you notice, we can set blending modes to our actual stroke itself, but I'm not going to do that. I would rather just go to normal for now. Keep it at black is fine. Okay, so as you see, when I bump down fill, it's just taking the fill color, the pink color, and making that transparent rather than making the stroke transparent. However, if I went to opacity and bumped down the opacity, as you can see, it's making the stroke transparent as well as the fill. So that is the general difference between opacity and fill.